Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tomeo, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tomeo.
And it is a Wednesday morning. It is August 6th. It's great to be with you, and we are in the new month of August, and excited about the program today. Of course, we'll have your weather and your news coming up, but because we are in what is known as Ferragosto in Italy, the month of August is a big holiday month. I thought we would talk about that in our Shrines and Wonders Wednesday today, because the way the Italians live their life, and our guest, by the way, for the first hour of the show, with whom we sat down last week, Sister Dede Byrne, she talks about this in terms of the way the Italians live their lives, and we're going to discuss that. It's a different approach in Italy. They don't live to work, they work to live. So life is important to them. Family is important to them. And I know that in parts of Italy, especially in the north, the faith has gone by the wayside. But the traditions of the faith is still very present, and they still have a deep love and a respect for the Blessed Mother, especially for family, and the general, I would say, moral teachings of the church. But my pastor, who studied in Rome and misses a lot about Rome, is doing a series in his bulletin articles about reflection and relaxation and the importance of pondering. And he talks about how the Italians really have that nailed down, and how he misses that when he came back to the United States, and how different it was for him after being a student there for so many years. So we'll talk about Ferragosto, and then we'll also explain how it is tied into the Assumption, of course, of the Blessed Virgin Mary, coming up as it always does on August 15th. And then, as I mentioned, we will be talking with the one, the only Sister Dede Byrne, who was in studio last week for interviews with Father Mitch Pacwa. You can go to the archives, of course, on our YouTube channel to take a look at the interview on Father Mitch Live on Wednesdays if you missed it. But she talks about discernment and takes us through her journey as a religious sister, a surgeon, of course, and someone who served in the armed forces, soldier, surgeon, sister. Amazing sister in Christ, an amazing witness to the faith. Sister Dede Byrne is going to be sitting down with us. And we did this actually last week, but I wanted to share it with you. And then, as I mentioned, we have Shrines and Wonders Wednesday. Right now, though, on a Wednesday morning in early August, let's see what's happening with the weather and what the forecast is going to be like for you wherever you are in the U.S. of A. And then we'll check the news on a Wednesday. As far as the weather goes, the National Weather Service says extreme heat will begin to peak across the desert southwest. We'll see multiple days of hot, dry, and windy conditions expected to bring fire weather concerns for portions of the Four Corners region into the central Great Basin and the Rockies as well. And then heavy rainfall and a flash flooding threat is continuing in the southeast, with poor air quality persisting from the upper Midwest into the Northeast due to the wildfire smoke from Canada. Right now, on a Wednesday morning at just a few minutes past the hour on August 6th, let's check the news for you. Catholic News Agency telling us that the Pope is extolling the work of the Knights of Columbus in a pre-recorded message for the Catholic Fraternal Organization's 143rd Supreme Convention being held in Washington, D.C. this week. In the video, he said, "I commend your efforts to bring together the men in your communities for prayer, formation, and fraternity, as well as the many charitable efforts of your local councils throughout the world, which brings hope and healing to many and continues to have the noble legacy of your founder." The Holy Father specifically commending the Knights of Columbus for their generous service to the vulnerable populations, including the unborn, pregnant mothers, children, those who are less fortunate, and those affected by the scourge of war. He tied the message to the convention's theme of Heralds of Hope, which was chosen to reflect the 2025 Jubilee year promulgated by Pope Francis. And results of a new Gallup poll revealing that Americans have a much more favorable view of the Pope than a number of other prominent U.S. and global figures. The polling company surveyed over 1,000 adults living in all 50 states in the District of Columbia. The margin of sampling error 4 percentage points at the 95% confidence level. The participants were asked from July 7th to July 21st if they have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of 14 figures making headlines in the news. The results of the survey found Americans have the most positive image of the Pope among the newsmakers, with the majority, 57%, reporting they have a favorable perception of him. In other news this morning, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is asking the state Supreme Court to remove Democratic state lawmaker, a particular one, from office. He filed a lawsuit yesterday targeting State Rep Gene Wu, calling him the ringleader of the Democrats who left the state. More than 50 Democrat lawmakers fled to block a Republican-led congressional redistricting plan. Abbott says House Democrats abandoned their duty to Texans based on voting results and must face consequences. Mark Mayfield tells us U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has arrived in Moscow for talks with Russian leader Vladimir Putin.
Russian news agency Interfax says Witkoff is meeting with Putin at the Kremlin, where the two are expected to discuss the war in Ukraine. President Trump has set a Friday deadline for ending the war between Russia and Ukraine and is reportedly considering more tariffs against Russia based on the outcome of the talks. Putin is calling on Russia to give up control of its eastern territory, now claimed by Russia, and to abandon its plans to join NATO. Ukraine has called both demands unacceptable. I'm Mark Mayfield.
The Clintons are being subpoenaed in the congressional investigation into late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The House Oversight Committee issuing subpoenas to 6 former attorneys general, 2 former FBI directors, the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and the former President Bill Clinton. The subpoena calling for the Department of Justice to provide Congress any Epstein files in its possession with victims' names redacted, as well as communications related to the case between the former Biden administration officials and the department. And millions in the southeast, as we mentioned in the weather, are under a flood watch as rain and thunderstorms hit the region over the next few days. The same cold front that helped develop the tropical storm Dexter off the coast of the mid-Atlantic is now bringing a separate threat to some southeast states throughout the week, and it could stretch, they say, all the way into the weekend. Cities that could be hit with flooding include Atlanta and Tallahassee. Dexter is moving away from the U.S., but the separate system is expected to cause heavy rain for days. And Sarah Lee Kessler tells us a Hudson Valley, New York daycare business is now being ordered to close its doors due to overcrowding and what they report as deplorable conditions.
Rockland County code inspectors got a complaint, investigated the Spring Valley facility on Tuesday, and said they had no choice but to order the daycare shuttered.
There's no bedroom, not even bathrooms, like half bathrooms. They were in disrepair, not in working order. There was no smoke detectors.
They ushered 100 kids and women to leave immediately, posting violation notices on the doors of several private homes that were apparently operating in tandem.
The managers in charge stated that the dwelling was being used as therapy, not as a daycare.
I'm Sarah Lee Kessler.
President Trump says he's working to make sure wildfires don't disrupt the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. Speaking from the White House this week, he said Governor Newsom has to allow more water to flow into California from the Pacific Northwest.
I've been fighting with them for a long time about allowing the water to come down from the Pacific Northwest, essentially.
Trump also saying California's protection of the Delta smelt has to stop. He blamed efforts to protect that species for the devastating Los Angeles wildfires back in January. The Transportation Secretary and interim NASA Administrator Sean Duffy is outlining the space agency's accelerated plan to build a nuclear reactor on the moon.
We're in a race to the moon, in a race with China to the moon, and to have a base on the moon, we need energy.
He said that reactor will have to generate 100 kilowatts of output, which is about the same amount of energy a 2,000 square foot home uses every 3.5 days. According to Duffy, the agency has spent millions on studies, but will now plan to move beyond studying and will be given direction to go forward. The fast track plan is part of the administration's attention to human spaceflight, and it appears to be Duffy's first major directive since being elected to lead NASA on an interim basis. Brian Chook tells us AI, artificial intelligence models, will allow federal agencies now to buy and use AI products.
The General Services Administration announced that ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude were added to the agency's multiple award schedule for purchase. President Trump has been calling for the acceleration of AI adoption in the federal government. The agency pointed to President Trump's AI action plan for the new additions to its purchasing system, and it also follows the addition of xAI's Grok to the GSA schedule. I'm Brian Shook.
And the Boeing machinist strike is in day 3 with neither side ready to talk or resume negotiations. Union Rep Earl Schuessler says workers walked off the job this week after rejecting a contract offer.
They don't have pension anymore. They don't have retiree health care anymore. So if the company wants to keep these folks here, they're going to pay them competitive wages, right? and benefits along the way.
There are no talks currently set between Boeing and International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, representing about 3,200 workers at 3 facilities in the St. Louis area. Boeing says its facilities are still open, but it won't be building products at the normal rates. And more homeowners, as Chris Carraggio tells us, are starting to pull their properties off the market as would-be buyers push back on higher home costs.
According to Realtor.com, the rate of delisted homes increased by 47% nationwide in May when compared to last year. Experts say the delisting surge is partly due to the overall expansion in active inventory. Home inventory hit a new post-pandemic high, and sellers aren't in as much of a rush to accept lower than their desired amount. I'm Chris Carraggio.
The Archdiocese of Miami is being granted permission to hold Mass inside Alligator Alcatraz. Community activist Chris Wills is applauding that decision.
It's a welcome step in the right direction. However, we've heard that to this day, they still do not have regular access to legal services.
Archbishop Thomas Wensky says Catholic chaplains and pastoral ministers can offer 2 liturgical masses to detainees and provide pastoral care. And August 6, marking the anniversary of what historians have called the start of the end of World War II. It was exactly 80 years ago when the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. By the end of 1945, more than a third of Hiroshima's estimated 350,000 citizens had died as a result of the bombing. In the years following, thousands more succumbed to illnesses and injuries because of that bombing. And finally, in our news segment on a Wednesday morning, Tammy Trujillo tells us the Cleveland Clinic offering tips on getting your children back on an early sleep schedule for school, with the school year starting very soon for many in the U.S.
Sleep specialist Dr. Brian Chen advises parents to start gradually getting children to bed earlier because that will be a lot easier than a flip to earlier bedtime at the last minute right before that first day of school.
In the summer, we tend to go to bed later. The sun is setting later. Our body's natural circadian rhythm, our clock in our brain, is set for later. And so we might be going to bed a lot later than we normally would be for school.
He says having a good bedtime routine also helps and advises against phones, other screens, and bright lights right before bed. He says blackout curtains should be considered to block out sunlight. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
It is a Wednesday morning. Thanks for tuning in to Catholic Connection, an EWTN production, and we'll be right back on a Wednesday. If you could see me right now in my home studio, you'd see my head going back and forth. I love this music. It reminds me of the Tarantella, the dance from southern Italy. Anyhow, I digress. It is a Wednesday, which means Shrines and Wonders Wednesday, shifting things a little bit so I could have some more time with you to talk about a very important event in the month of August in Bella Italia, that being Ferragosto. Now, before I get to that, it ties in with an article that my wonderful pastor, Monsignor Michael Bulgarian in the Archdiocese of Detroit, he's also been my spiritual director for many years, has written regarding the consequences of living a busy, hurried life. Now, this is part 2 that came out last week, and he's been teaching and preaching on this for a short while. I mean, he kind of does this every year, especially in the summertime, to get people to slow down, to be still and know that I am God. And what I loved about this article is that he is reflecting on this idea of reflection and pondering and slowing down while thinking about the time he spent in Italy. He was in Italy for many years as a student, and he lived at the North American College, which is a beautiful place in Rome for seminarians, and of course studied. I'm trying to remember which university at which he studied, but suffice it to say he's a very well-educated Catholic teacher, preacher, also a canon lawyer, and also served as a secretary for one of our wonderful archbishops, who's now retired, of course, Adam Cardinal Maida. And so he spent a lot of time going back and forth to Italy with the good cardinal, and also, of course, living in Rome for several years while he was studying. So let me just share his thoughts on this, based on his experience in Rome and what he took from that. The consequences of living a busy, hurried life, part 2. Many people already commented positively about this new series, exploring the spiritual and personal consequences of living a busy, hurried life. I was recalling with someone on the way into church that sometimes I wish we lived like what we saw on Little House on the Prairie or The Waltons. Life was different back then, and it was much slower. I had the opportunity to experience, he says, a different pace of life when I lived in Rome. That afternoon siesta or a stroll through the local park became a much appreciated staple of each day. That 2-hour nap, which technically is called riposo in the middle of the day, quite incredible, Monsignor says. It was as if the city slowed down to a snail's pace from 2 to 4 p.m. every day. And you didn't mind taking a nap in the middle of the afternoon because so many others were doing the same thing. The same was true with vacation time. And here he's discussing what we're talking about this morning, the month of August, Ferragosto. During the month of August, it was pretty much expected that most people would flee to the coastal towns to escape the heat and simply enjoy what the Italians call Ferragosto. You wouldn't think twice about taking off 2, 3, even 4 weeks because everyone else was doing it. He goes on to say, our culture is so different. We don't take siestas or naps, riposos or naps, because not many people do. And it's seen as taking away from our productivity. Many avoid taking longer vacations because others don't do it. And once again, it would distract our work. Monsignor goes on to say, my Italian friends used to have a saying that I believe is so true. They would say, you Americans have it all wrong. You live to work. We instead work to live. Living to work has taken a toll on our health and so many of our relationships, including our relationship with God. In Psalm 46:11, the psalmist writes, be still and know that I am God. Being still is sometimes or something that doesn't compete with many of us or compute with many of us. We don't know how to be still. And believe me, I fall into that same trap. He goes on to say, we need to be intentional in our quest to spend time with God. That means making Sunday celebrations of the Eucharist a priority in our lives. We need to make time for prayer. We need to make time for solitude. When St. Pope John Paul II made his apostolic pilgrimage to the U.S. and Canada, he had this to say to the young people gathered at the Louisiana Superdome on September 12, 1987. If you really wish to follow Christ, if you want your love for him to grow and last, then you must be faithful to prayer. It is the key to vitality of your life in Christ. Without prayer, your faith and love will die. If you are constant in daily prayer and in the Sunday celebration of the Mass, your love for Jesus will increase, and your heart will know deep peace, such as a world could never give. And so this deep peace and this quiet time with prayer ties directly into reflection, relaxation, taking time off, and taking time with God and family. And that's why the month of Ferragosto I find is so interesting. Now, it started out many, many centuries ago. The name comes from Caesar Augustus, and it was meant to be a holiday for the workers in the field, the agricultural workers. And then eventually, centuries later, the church built it around because of the influence of Catholicism, Christianity, Catholicism more particularly, around the beautiful feast day of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. Now, all through the month of August, because of Ferragosto, there are beautiful celebrations. And one of the most favorite and most popular and most well-known is the Palio race, which happens in Siena in August, which is a fascinating horse race in the middle of the beautiful Piazza del Campo, one of the most beautiful piazzas in all of Italy. That's just one example of the kind of festivities that go on. There are different markets and fireworks and different saints that are honored. And you go to the coastal towns and there's different fish festivals. And it's all built around this idea of rest. And yes, in many places, for example, in our hometown in central Italy, in Umbria, even outside of Ferragosto, and I love this. Sometimes it can be inconvenient if I forgot to get coffee cream or eggs or something, and the stores are closed. But we know that we have to get to the store, to the grocery store, by 1 o'clock in the middle of the week, except for one store in our area that stays open all day long. But the vast majority of ones close down for 2 or 3 hours. The clothing stores, maybe you'll find a pharmacy open for emergencies, but most of the stores shut down and they go home for a riposo, a rest, a nice pranzo, the main meal with their family. So this idea of working to live, in other words, what you do for a living is going to support your way of life, is what's prominent still in Italy, despite the fact that, again, many people have fallen away from the faith. And even the idea of an aperitivo, which is, I would say, similar to happy hour in the United States, is meant to slow people down. The word aperitivo comes from aperto, or to open. Aperto means open. And what it does, it's supposed to open your palate, your appetite, prepare you for a nice meal. And so even there with the aperitivo, the idea is you are getting ready for something special. You are slowing down to enjoy, number one, your time with friends as you're drinking maybe your Aperol Spritz or your club soda or your glass of wine, whatever you're drinking, and you're served something maybe a little salty like olives or some potato chips to get the appetite going. And then you move on to a nice dinner or cena. The whole idea is it's all done in steps. It's not let's just have a quick beer or chug that Diet Coke or that regular Coke and let's go off to grab a pizza. No, it is all about slowing down, being still and knowing He is God, spending time with family and friends, and most importantly, spending time in prayer to appreciate life more. My paisans, they don't live to work, they work to live. And we would be wise to do the same. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the second hour of Catholic Connection. Great to be with you. And whatever time of the day it is, it's always great to catch up with someone as dynamic and important in terms of evangelization and pro-life witness as the amazing Sister Deidre or Dede Byrne, Roman Catholic religious sister, missionary, surgeon, and retired U.S. Army colonel. And as her bio says, despite her personal humility, which is very obvious, she's extremely humble. Sister has been a fearless advocate for the unborn, the chronically ill and disabled, and she has worked tirelessly to defend conscience protections for medical doctors. Now, I could go on, but if I give her a complete bio, it'll take time away from the interview. So, Sister, I can't tell you how excited I am to have you on the program this morning. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Teresa, for having me.
How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
Yeah? What you working on?
I hear you were in Orvieto. I wish I could be there.
Oh, I love Orvieto. It's so beautiful. Yeah, it's one of my favorite places on the planet. So what are you up to? Tell us a little bit what you're doing.
Well, I'm a religious sister in Washington, D.C., the Little Workers of the Sacred Hearts of Jesus and Mary. Mm-hmm. Our community, which is about 130 years old or so, is predominantly teaching, but our house in Washington is considered the medical house. So I am a general surgeon predominantly, and I do free surgery for the poor, still operating, still practicing, because practicing makes perfection. We also do the abortion pill reversal, which is, always a roller coaster ministry. But in the last 3 weeks, we've had 3 moms who have asked for reversal. And thanks be to God, each mother, the babies are doing beautifully. We just saw one yesterday because we were testing out a new ultrasound machine that we'd like. We're going to have to fundraise. It's a little bit expensive, but you can do 3D images on first trimester babies, which really opens the doorway for the mother to fall in love with her baby. We also do, we run a pro bono physical therapy and diabetic eye clinic all in our little house in D.C., and we support 2 beautiful ladies who do full-time sidewalk counseling at the horrific third trimester abortionist, Dr. San Angelo. So they go almost every day to pray there. So that's what we do in our DC. Plus, in between, we're adoring Jesus and the Blessed Sacrament. We have, we're a traditional community, so we have Mass every morning. We have adoration with morning prayer in the morning, and in the evening we have adoration. And then in the midday, we sometimes we're walking up to the Franciscan monastery because my 102-year-old mother lives with us, and so we try to wheel her up there.
102?
Yes.
Wow. Bless her heart. That's amazing.
Yes.
Well, do you think you might live past 100? We sure hope so.
Me? Oh, I'm ready to go tomorrow, today.
No, don't say that. We need you. Well, listen, you're going to be on with Father Mitch tonight, and you're going to be talking about discernment. And this is such an important topic. What will you be focusing on this evening with Father Mitch?
Well, this is I didn't exactly know what we were talking about, so so this is good. This is always a good topic anyhow, because discernment brings us back to what's most important in our life, and that's the most blessed sacrament. And, our founder, Blessed Greco, said, "It was before the most blessed sacrament that I found the love of Jesus and the power of that love." And Mary is always our guide as well. And if people actually could recognize that treasure of the Blessed Sacrament and how much our Lord can work through us to help Him bring souls to Him, there would be standing room only in the chapel. But we have to try to work on bringing that secret out. So that will help young people to discern in what direction the Lord is calling them.
It's so important, though, a continued discernment, because I remember my husband's a deacon. He's a deacon in the Archdiocese of Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And when he first started out in the diaconate, they told us that you're discerning now as to whether, and of course they're discerning too, the formation people, as to whether the deacon candidates are right for the vocation. But they always told us, and as a wife, you have to go through the program with your husband, that you're discerning all the way through. It's not, okay, I've discerned, I think I need to be a deacon, I'm going to go forward, and then it ends. And they say even after your ordination, you discern every single day. And I think that's true. That should be true for all of us, because I know I get up in the morning and my spiritual director told me to use my show, in addition to my prayers and readings and whatnot, to use my show as a form of prayer. And one of the prayers I say every day, sister, is, Lord, if I am still in your will, let this show continue. This is what you still want me to do. Otherwise, just, give me a sign that you want me to move elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But it's a constant discernment in our lives, isn't it?
Yes. It's a moment to moment. We're like little children. I remember where we always have to depend on our Lord. But I remember one time I think in Dallas. I was one of those trains that take you from a part of the airport to the other, and it was crowded. And a little guy, about 3 years old. And it got the train was a little bit rocky. He didn't look up. He just put his hand up, and the mother put her hand down, and they grabbed each other's hands.
Aww.
And I think that's how we're supposed to be, that we are like little children who reach out to Christ every day to know that He's carrying us through and guiding us. And I found in my own life, and especially in discernment, that it was when I finally emptied myself of my own desires.
Yep.
All of a sudden, things started happening, and it wasn't what I envisioned. It was something totally different, but it's always a joy.
That's the thing, though. You have to give it over to God. My mother, my family's originally from New Jersey. My mother had this really great, strong Jersey accent. And I was asked in an interview yesterday what the best thing my parents gave me or taught me. I said, obviously, first the Catholic faith, but my parents, and my mother especially, would say, offer it up to God and put it at the foot of the cross. But, you start there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I was, when you mentioned the word cross, it reminds me of, I always tell people that I was given a message. I am the sinner. I was given a message from a saint. When Mother Teresa was in town in 97, and I was in a wealthy Catholic in the D.C. area, had given her Learjet to fly Mother everywhere around the U.S., and so a bunch of us were up there kind of hanging out and fooling around before she arrived. And then when she finally arrived, I had a few minutes, precious moments, to sit with her. And I said to Mother...
Hold that thought. We have to take a break. I don't want people to go away. So this is a nice tease. We're going to hear what Mother Teresa said to our guest, Sister Dede Byrne. When we come back, she's in studio with us this morning. What a gift. We'll be right back. Hope we're having a beautiful day. We are here at EWTN. We have an amazing guest in studio with us. What a gift to spend time with the beautiful Sister Dede, with Dede Byrne. We're talking about discerning God's will and other topics, and you can check out our beautiful order, Little Workers of the Sacred Hearts. It is littleworkersofthesacredhearts.com. And there's a beautiful book all about Sister. It was written by a friend of mine, actually. Lisa Carson will mention that as well. But Sister, you were keeping people on the edge of their seats, as we say in radio, and you were saying that you had a very profound conversation with Mother Teresa. Tell us about it.
It was in -- and she had just finished her time in Washington. She had received the congressional an award given by the congressmen and women, and humbly she accepted it. And so she's on a plane. I was up there in the area of the plane, and the sisters gave me a few moments to just be with her. And because I was still discerning, I was perpetually discerning. I was a surgical resident still. I was still training, so I couldn't enter. But I sat with her, and I was saying, Mother, I was questioning about maybe whether she would be welcoming physicians and, where I could actually practice. And she looked at me and she said, keep your eyes on the cross. That was it. She had very powerful but simple messages that really cut to the core. And I tell people that, so a saint spoke to a great sinner, me, and I share with all you future saints that we must keep our eyes on the cross. And the Lord will help us understand what He wants for us. It may not be immediate, and also our Blessed Mother, she's our guide. And, she gave her life sacrificially like no other human. Her fiat really changed the world. It was before the Blessed Sacrament, with an open heart and sincere heart, that I personally asked, Lord, to whom shall I go? And so if we can just give a fiat, our yes to Jesus, to change, it will change the world.
Well, St. Catherine of Siena says, when you are whom you are meant to be, you will set the world ablaze, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
And I think so many of us miss what we're supposed to be because we have an idea in our head, and we all do this, of, okay, this is what I'm doing now. It's working well. It's going well for my family, but we have this desire in our heart maybe to go in a different direction, but we kind of suppress it for a variety of reasons. That's why there has to be constant discernment.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah, exactly. I think, and again, a lot of people say, where would you or how would you best proceed with this? And I always tell everyone, go to the chapel, spend a few moments before the Blessed Sacrament, just thanking Him. The little mnemonic acts, adoration, thanksgiving. Adoration, contrition, thanksgiving, and then supplication, asking for prayers. And that little mnemonic will help you, to guide you to spend time before Him. Because a lot of people will go into the chapel and say, I'm not sure where, what to do or what to say. Remember Holy Mother St. Teresa of Avila would talk about watching the hourglass.
And also counting the bricks on the wall. I love her because I was named after her patron saint, so I take great comfort in this huge mystic.
Oh, I know.
Of which I am not, right? And not a saint hardly. And she was so funny, but she was so real. She talked about being distracted.
Well, Mother Angelica was the same way.
Yeah, exactly.
I love her because of that, her humanity.
Mm-hmm.
And you are a saint in the making, though. Don't say you're not a saint. You're a saint in the making.
We're all saints in the making. That's true. Thank you. Thank you, Sister. Yeah. At what point, and let's go back to when you were discerning your vocation as a religious sister, were there particular messages that enabled you to move forward? What was it, if people are listening and they're discerning maybe a vocation to the diaconate or even to another part of the religious life?
Well, I didn't really have locutions or anything, but my mother will say, and all moms know their kids the best, that my vocation started in utero. And so it wasn't really it was more of a feeling, a drawing of, a certain way of life. So my dad, who was a thoracic surgeon in Virginia, he was donating to a couple of missionary communities, and we'd get all these pamphlets, and I was the type of kid that would just stare at those pamphlets, and you could just feel the excitement I could feel the excitement in my heart. It's very much like, I think, St. Ignatius of Loyola. Remember when he was injured and he's looking first at, thinking about his girlfriend, and then he would read books on the saints or read books about, read the Bible. And that excitement and that love was longer lasting when it was of God versus something that's not of God. So for me, that was sort of how it happened, in the sense that anytime I was doing something where I was forgetting about myself and doing things for others, it was long-lasting and joyous, and I nurtured that in high school, doing some volunteer work, and in college, volunteering to do some inner city teaching, or working with children with Downs. I mean, if you want to look at the eyes of God, look at a child with Down syndrome. Total love and joy. Joy. And no judgment at all. So that's how it happened. But because I went to med school, it was a miracle. That's a whole long story, but I went to med school, and then I went on and trained in the Army to help pay for the tuition. So that's how I ended up in the military. It was in 1978, I guess, when I signed on that dotted line. And then I did missionary work, and then went on to do surgery, because I felt called to really be a missionary, and I felt surgery was really going to be the best way to prepare for that. And so...
You are fearless, though, in terms of your voice, especially for the voiceless. And of course, the talk you gave many years ago at the Republican convention regarding life and the unborn, just phenomenal, and gave so many of us so much courage. What's the message you have, sister, for those in the pro-life movement today? I mean, we are doing a lot better. We're seeing Planned Parenthood facilities around the country shut down, defunded for a year. Other efforts, of course, the Supreme Court overruling Roe v. Wade several years ago, but there's a lot of work. We have to change hearts. That's the biggest thing.
That's it. You hit the nail on the head. We have to pray. We are simply God's instrument. He's in charge. Don't get discouraged. Keep up your beautiful, godly work. God will answer prayers in ways that are way beyond we could ever imagine. So you mentioned the RNC. I was in the chapel in 2020 in August. I was a little bit concerned about the rhetoric of the other side, who were touting to be Catholics but not really supporting life like a Catholic should. And so I sat in the chapel and I prayed, Lord, let me be your instrument, let me be your voice for life in any way. And I was actually saying it in a way of apologizing. I didn't feel like I was doing enough for him. And about an hour to 2 hours later, the White House called and asked if I would speak at the RNC.
Wow.
And I said, can I speak for the unborn? And they said, yes, you can. And so that's how that unfolded. So when I was praying, I was thinking more about getting involved with 40 Days for Life, this kind of earthly level thinking. But God will take your prayers. You pray with an open heart and a sincere heart. He will answer those prayers in ways that you will never, ever, ever imagine.
It's incredible. It's incredible. That just gave me the chills, though, because I think if when we watched you, we thought for sure this was planned long term, because it was a very important event and you're such an incredible speaker. But to think, it goes back to originally about what we started to discuss, the importance of praying and discerning before the Blessed Sacrament. And God's like, okay, well, here you go. There's an event coming up, so bada boom, bada bing, sister, we got you there. But that was incredible, but such a direct answer to prayer, but in a very different way, right?
Yes, because I did get attacked a bit. Had all sorts of mean names, but. After 29 years in the Army, having 5 brothers, and I'm used to.
You're hardly a wallflower who can take some criticism. Yeah.
What I was going to say, I blocked a little bit about what I was going to say, but.
Talking about that it was a direct and very quick answer to your prayer, but very different than very different than you expected. Right.
It was anything that I had pre-planned. One thing, because our community is predominantly, we're Italian based. We're in Italy, in our mother house is in Acre, if you ever get down there.
Which is where? I'm not familiar with
southern
that.
Calabria.
That's where my father's family is from.
So, well, yeah.
Calabria.
So our Mother General was like, I had told her that the White House had invited me to speak on life, and she thought that was great. Brava, brava. But then when she heard it was at a Republican convention, she said, we don't do political things. And I said, the sanctity of life, the unborn, is not a political issue. It's a moral and a theological issue. And when it's the unborn in the womb of the mother being slaughtered, ripped, torn, it is a reflection of what's going on in this world. It's sort of like the center, the ground zero, the tsunami of what's happening with marriages falling apart, contracepting, the transgender ideology, euthanasia, which is now my new fight, by the way, euthanasia. So we have to nurture this, the unborn, because that will, if we can stop that, we'll stop everything else.
Right. But everything is political, and the Catechism calls for us to be voters, so that's political, and we're supposed to be involved in the public square. That's all political. Every single thing we do, we get out of bed and we go outside, and there's laws that are affecting every single one of us, so it's all political in one sense.
But as a religious sister, and that was like the big target, and people were threatening to take our nonprofit status away and all blah, blah, blah. I tried to express that this child, I know what I was going to say now, but this child, all children are made in the image and likeness of God, and we had to protect it from that very beginning, from the womb to the tomb. But
I mean, this gift that you have in speaking, I mean, you're so multifaceted in the gifts that the Lord gave you.
I don't feel like I have that gift, but I do want to say one thing.
Sure, go ahead.
As a physician, I always prayed that I would have the opportunity to say that life begins at the moment of conception. I always ask God, please give me the chance, wherever I am. And because if you look on the OBGYN, the academy will say life begins, after that. Everybody's kind of come up with their own definition of when life begins. But it's so clear that life begins at the moment of conception that I wanted to say that, and the Lord answered my prayer above and beyond being able to say that at the RNC.
Well, Sister, thank you for spending so much time with us this morning. I know you have a busy schedule at EWTN. What a gift you are. Stay strong in the Lord and don't lose heart. I know you won't. But I also want to refer people to the beautiful book written all about you with my friend, Dr. Lisa Karzan. I know her very well from southeastern Michigan. She's an amazing pro-life warrior. Sister, Soldier, Surgeon. And we have that on the EWTN Religious Catalog. And, of course, we'll be plugging that on EWTN as we always do, including with the appearance of Father Mitch. Thank you, Sister. Pray for me and Deacon Dom. And you go, girl. You keep speaking up for those who can't speak for themselves.
God bless you.
All right, my dear. Wow. What a gift she is. Thank you, Sister Dede. We love you and we love your ministry. And we're so blessed to have you in studio with us here on a Wednesday morning. We'll be right back. Hope you enjoyed our interview with Sister Dede Byrne. What an amazing gift to us in the one holy Catholic and Apostolic faith. And if you'd like to learn more about her life, I would definitely pick up a copy of a beautiful book written, as I mentioned, by a friend of mine in the pro-life movement here in Michigan, Sister, Soldier, Surgeon. Of course, it's available at the EWTN Religious Catalog. You can also find it on Amazon. And what a beautiful book and testimony it is to this amazing woman of the Lord who is just unstoppable. And I loved what she said about when you submit your will totally to God, you have no idea what's going to happen. And that's a very good thing. And she's saying that in a good way because he surprises us. Don't put God in a box. I have this beautiful icon of St. Teresa of Avila, my patron, on the wall in my home studio here in southeastern Michigan, and it says, "God withholds himself from no one who perseveres." And she's a great inspiration for all of us to persevere. Of course, tomorrow is a Thursday morning, and that means the one, the only, Father Mitch Pacwa, of course, who sat down with Sister last week on Father Mitch Wednesday's live program. He's going to be with us for our Cultural Connections on a Tuesday. And I always wait till the last minute to see what we're going to discuss with Father Mitch, because there's so much breaking news nowadays. And since we see everything through the lens of Scripture and the teachings of the Church, there's always a story, whether it be the morning of our Thursday broadcast or the night before. And so who knows? The good Lord knows. The Holy Spirit will tell us about which we'll be discussing. But I hope you can tune in. We'll talk to you then. Have a great day on Domani.
Welcome to Catholic Connection with Teresa Tamio, keeping you connected to your faith and your world. Teresa tackles the issues of faith and culture, the pro-life message, and media awareness. And now, here's Teresa Tamio.
And thanks for tuning in to the second hour of Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. Hope you're having a great day, middle of the week. Here we are in August. Lots of folks getting their kids ready for school, but stay tuned because we have great information to help you not just get through your day, but enjoy it and embrace it, because every day is a gift from God. Coming up this hour, we are going to have a 2 cent segment shortly after the news and the weather and all that good stuff. And then sitting down with my good friend, Deacon Dominic Cerrato. There was a story that came out not too long ago, actually, I believe it was in early July or late June, about the diaconate across the United States of America. What's very interesting about the diaconate, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the United States and Australia have the most deacons in all the world. Now, I found this out when Deacon Dom and I attended the diaconate convocation in Rome, and I think it was in 2015, if I remember correctly, the Jubilee of Deacons. And it was pretty amazing to me. We were actually in the English-speaking section, and our leader, who gave us all of our talks and presentations, was the amazing Cardinal Pell. But even with the United States leading the way with the diaconate program in terms of the number of deacons, we need more. And so why did this research find that not enough men are applying for discernment of the diaconate process? Because even if you apply for it and you're accepted, there is a period where you have to, well, the whole time you're in formation, you have to discern. But just because you enroll in it doesn't mean that you are forced to stay in. No, there's a whole process. But Deacon Dominic really dives into this in terms of what's needed, what's happened, and what we can do to encourage couples, because the wife is very involved in this and the deacon cannot go forward, the diaconate candidate cannot go forward without the wife's approval, what we can do to foster more diaconate vocation. So that is our discussion for this morning on the second hour of Catholic Connection. We hope you can stay tuned for the entire program. And right now, though, because we have to give you the weather and also the news, let's get started and see what the National Weather Service is saying about conditions across the country. As far as the weather goes, the National Weather Service says extreme heat will begin to peak across the desert southwest. We'll see multiple days of hot, dry, and windy conditions expected to bring fire weather concerns for portions of the Four Corners region into the central Great Basin and the Rockies as well. And then heavy rainfall and a flash flooding threat is continuing in the southeast, with poor air quality persisting from the upper Midwest into the Northeast due to the wildfire smoke from Canada. Right now, on a Wednesday morning at just a few minutes past the hour on August 6th, let's check the news for you. Catholic News Agency telling us that the Pope is extolling the work of the Knights of Columbus in a pre-recorded message for the Catholic Fraternal Organization's 143rd Supreme Convention being held in Washington, D.C. this week. In the video, he said, "I commend your efforts to bring together the men in your communities for prayer, formation, and fraternity, as well as the many charitable efforts of your local councils throughout the world, which brings hope and healing to many and continues to have the noble legacy of your founder." The Holy Father specifically commending the Knights of Columbus for their generous service to the vulnerable populations, including the unborn, pregnant mothers, children, those who are less fortunate, and those affected by the scourge of war. He tied the message to the convention's theme of Heralds of Hope, which was chosen to reflect the 2025 Jubilee year promulgated by Pope Francis. And results of a new Gallup poll revealing that Americans have a much more favorable view of the Pope than a number of other prominent U.S. and global figures. The polling company surveyed over 1,000 adults living in all 50 states in the District of Columbia. The margin of sampling error 4 percentage points at the 95% confidence level. The participants were asked from July 7th to July 21st if they have a favorable or unfavorable opinion of 14 figures making headlines in the news. The results of the survey found Americans have the most positive image of the Pope among the newsmakers, with the majority, 57%, reporting they have a favorable perception of him. In other news this morning, Texas Governor Greg Abbott is asking the state Supreme Court to remove Democratic state lawmaker, a particular one, from office. He filed a lawsuit yesterday targeting State Rep Gene Wu, calling him the ringleader of the Democrats who left the state. More than 50 Democrat lawmakers fled to block a Republican-led congressional redistricting plan. Abbott says House Democrats abandoned their duty to Texans based on voting results and must face consequences. Mark Mayfield tells us U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff has arrived in Moscow for talks with Russian leader Vladimir Putin.
Russian news agency Interfax says Witkoff is meeting with Putin at the Kremlin, where the two are expected to discuss the war in Ukraine. President Trump has set a Friday deadline for ending the war between Russia and Ukraine and is reportedly considering more tariffs against Russia based on the outcome of the talks. Putin is calling on Russia to give up control of its eastern territory, now claimed by Russia, and to abandon its plans to join NATO. Ukraine has called both demands unacceptable. I'm Mark Mayfield.
The Clintons are being subpoenaed in the congressional investigation into late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. The House Oversight Committee issuing subpoenas to 6 former attorneys general, 2 former FBI directors, the former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, and the former President Bill Clinton. The subpoena calling for the Department of Justice to provide Congress any Epstein files in its possession with victims' names redacted, as well as communications related to the case between the former Biden administration officials and the department. And millions in the southeast, as we mentioned in the weather, are under a flood watch as rain and thunderstorms hit the region over the next few days. The same cold front that helped develop the tropical storm Dexter off the coast of the mid-Atlantic is now bringing a separate threat to some southeast states throughout the week, and it could stretch, they say, all the way into the weekend. Cities that could be hit with flooding include Atlanta and Tallahassee. Dexter is moving away from the U.S., but the separate system is expected to cause heavy rain for days. And Sarah Lee Kessler tells us a Hudson Valley, New York daycare business is now being ordered to close its doors due to overcrowding and what they report as deplorable conditions.
Rockland County code inspectors got a complaint, investigated the Spring Valley facility on Tuesday, and said they had no choice but to order the daycare shuttered.
There's no bedroom, not even bathrooms, like half bathrooms. They were in disrepair, not in working order. There was no smoke detectors.
They ushered 100 kids and women to leave immediately, posting violation notices on the doors of several private homes that were apparently operating in tandem.
The managers in charge stated that the dwelling was being used as therapy, not as a daycare.
I'm Sarah Lee Kessler.
President Trump says he's working to make sure wildfires don't disrupt the 2028 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. Speaking from the White House this week, he said Governor Newsom has to allow more water to flow into California from the Pacific Northwest.
I've been fighting with them for a long time about allowing the water to come down from the Pacific Northwest, essentially.
Trump also saying California's protection of the Delta smelt has to stop. He blamed efforts to protect that species for the devastating Los Angeles wildfires back in January. The Transportation Secretary and interim NASA Administrator Sean Duffy is outlining the space agency's accelerated plan to build a nuclear reactor on the moon.
We're in a race to the moon, in a race with China to the moon, and to have a base on the moon, we need energy.
He said that reactor will have to generate 100 kilowatts of output, which is about the same amount of energy a 2,000 square foot home uses every 3.5 days. According to Duffy, the agency has spent millions on studies, but will now plan to move beyond studying and will be given direction to go forward. The Fast Track Plan is part of the administration's attention to human spaceflight, and it appears to be Duffy's first major directive since being elected to lead NASA on an interim basis. Brian Shook tells us AI, artificial intelligence models, will allow federal agencies now to buy and use AI products.
The General Services Administration announced that ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude were added to the agency's multiple award schedule for purchase. President Trump has been calling for the acceleration of AI adoption in the federal government. The agency pointed to President Trump's AI action plan for the new additions to its purchasing system, and it also follows the addition of xAI's Grok to the GSA schedule. I'm Brian Shook.
And the Boeing machinist strike is in day 3 with neither side ready to talk or resume negotiations. Union Rep Earl Schuessler says workers walked off the job this week after rejecting a contract offer.
They don't have pension anymore. They don't have retiree health care anymore. So if the company wants to keep these folks here, they're going to pay them competitive wages, right? And benefits along the way.
There are no talks currently set between Boeing and International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, representing about 3,200 workers at 3 facilities in the St. Louis area. Boeing says its facilities are still open, but it won't be building products at the normal rates. And more homeowners, as Chris Coraggio tells us, are starting to pull their properties off the market as would-be buyers push back on higher home costs.
According to Realtor.com, the rate of delisted homes increased by 47% nationwide in May when compared to last year. Experts say the delisting surge is partly due to the overall expansion in active inventory. Home inventory hit a new post-pandemic high, and sellers aren't in as much of a rush to accept lower than their desired amount. I'm Chris Coraggio.
The Archdiocese of Miami is being granted permission to hold Mass inside Alligator Alcatraz. Community activist Chris Wills is applauding that decision.
It's a welcome step in the right direction. However, we've heard that to this day, they still do not have regular access to legal services.
Archbishop Thomas Wensky says Catholic chaplains and pastoral ministers can offer 2 liturgical masses to detainees and provide pastoral care. And August 6, marking the anniversary of what historians have called the start of the end of World War II. It was exactly 80 years ago when the U.S. dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan. By the end of 1945, more than a third of Hiroshima's estimated 350,000 citizens had died as a result of the bombing. In the years following, thousands more succumbed to illnesses and injuries because of that bombing. And finally, in our news segment on a Wednesday morning, Tammy Trujillo tells us the Cleveland Clinic offering tips on getting your children back on an early sleep schedule for school, with the school year starting very soon for many in the U.S.
Sleep specialist Dr. Brian Chen advises parents to start gradually getting children to bed earlier because that will be a lot easier than a flip to earlier bedtime at the last minute right before that first day of school.
In the summer, we tend to go to bed later. The sun is setting later. Our body's natural circadian rhythm, our clock in our brain, is set for later. And so we might be going to bed a lot later than we normally would be for school.
He says having a good bedtime routine also helps and advises against phones, other screens, and bright lights right before bed. He says blackout curtains should be considered to block out sunlight. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
It is a Wednesday morning. Thanks for tuning in to Catholic Connection in EWTN production, and we'll be right back on a Wednesday. Welcome back, Catholic Connection. It's 10:16 Eastern Time, wherever you are. 9:16 Central, and of course, 7:16 on the West Coast. We're glad you're tuned in. Maybe you're even listening out of the country. If you're over in Italy, it is 4:16, as a matter of fact. If you want to know the time difference, it's about 6 hours difference. Sorry, I'm still kind of going back and forth between the time zones. We just got back here in the United States on Saturday, so it takes a little bit of adjusting. Anyway, I was really moved by the homily our associate pastor, Father Bob, gave at our parish in the Archdiocese of Detroit yesterday. He's such a good homilist. He has a beautiful testimony. Actually, when he became a priest many years ago, probably about 8 years ago now, he actually was on Catholic Connection in the first hour of my program for my Michigan listeners, telling his story. He worked in the automotive industry for many years and had discerned married life and children, but didn't feel God was calling him to that, and had a profound conversion and decided that he needed to be in the priesthood. Anyway, every time he talks about Jesus on the cross, he gets choked up. He did it again yesterday. He's just a very sensitive and beautiful priest, and I always appreciate his insights. But he was talking about the gospel that we heard yesterday, and the Pope also commenting on this, of course, in his beautiful homily to parishioners at St. Thomas Villanova, which is a really pretty little church in Castel Gandolfo. It's very close to the actual Apostolic Palace. I mean, Castel Gandolfo is not very big, and it's like a very short walk from the palace to the little church there in the main piazza of Castel Gandolfo. Anyway, our associate pastor, Father Bob, was talking about the fact that Jesus gives us a little bit more to think about in terms of how we are to respond to this gospel. So let me just read the gospel for you, because sometimes I know we get busy, we forget what the readings were. It happens to me all the time. So this is a parable of the Good Samaritan, which we heard yesterday, and it's from the Gospel of St. Luke, chapter 10. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. Teacher, he asked, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus said, what is written in the law? And he replied, how do you read it? He answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. You have answered correctly, Jesus replied. Do this and you will live. But he wanted to justify himself. So he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? In reply, Jesus said, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him, he said, and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. Which of these 3, Jesus asked, do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus said, go and do likewise. All right, so that is a very powerful gospel. Now, our associate pastor, Father Bob, said he looked at it again and thought, wow, look at what Jesus did. So if you look at the way, what Father Bob would say, if you look at the way Jesus responded to the expert in the law, the expert of the law, right? And I love this line, verse 29 in chapter 10 of Luke's Gospel, in this parable, the Good Samaritan. He wanted to justify himself. And don't we all do that? Okay, I just need to make sure, and this is what Father Bob explained so beautifully, I just need to make sure I have the list. I have the list of all the people that I'm supposed to help. So Jesus, you tell me, am I supposed to help this person? Am I supposed to help that person? Who is it? Well, obviously we know, right, some about that. We see it in the catechism, and we've been told as children growing up in the faith, you have to help the poor, the immigrant, the widow, the most vulnerable, the elderly, the sick, right? The unborn, obviously. We're pro-life from womb to tomb. We know all of that. But what Jesus, I believe, and this is what Father Bob said, and I was talking to him about this after Mass, Jesus is saying, okay, but do you have eyes to see and ears to hear? I shouldn't have to give you a list. If you are connected to me, and if you love me with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength, then you should have some insight into the needs of people. You should have some insight. And so what does that mean? That requires us, which I think is a real challenge, and this is what really made me think after my associate pastor's homily, is that we have to work at this, okay? Which means we have to be engaged and we have to be open, because it may not be just that typical list of people that I just mentioned. Now, that's obvious, right? Being pro-life people, we're always going to be concerned with life from womb to tomb. Pregnant mothers who need our help and support, the unborn child in the womb, the elderly, right? against so-called assisted suicide, all these things. So the basics, the poor, make sure that we're tithing properly and making sure we're supporting efforts in our area. We're going to talk about that in the next segment regarding what's happening in Texas and how people are helping. All right, so we support charities, we support the poor, we support others in need. But what does that mean? And what Father said in his homily is it's not always that typical list of people. There could be somebody right next door in our own domestic church, in our own family, that is someone in need of mercy and love. And so God doesn't want us to put that in a box. And this is just a brilliant, I think, answer, where Jesus is telling him, look at this. And you have all these people. And I think it was very, very interesting that he mentioned a priest and a Levite. So this man of the law would recognize that these people who were very official, a priest and a Levite, those should know better, right? But what did they do? They passed by him on the other side. And so if this man's trying to justify himself, he can't justify himself as someone who is very learned and supposedly knowledgeable, and then seeing these two examples of people who are pretty close to his level of ignoring the obvious. So what Jesus is telling all of us is that just because you may, know scripture and know church teaching, it's a lot different than acting on it. And also the fact that it was a Samaritan. Samaritans were very, very much disrespected and looked down upon by the people of the law, by the Jews, of course, so that we know the Samaritan woman. They were considered to be of, uncouth heritage. They were mixed. They weren't pure Jews. And they were looked down upon. And that's why when we see in the Gospel of John and the woman at the well, that the apostles, it says, disciples, when they came back, were shocked that he was talking to a woman. Well, first of all, another example where men didn't have public conversations with women. Women weren't deemed important enough, number one. Number two, it would be scandalous for a man to be talking to a woman in public the way Jesus was engaging this woman at the well. So that's why it says the apostles were surprised he was talking to a woman. But again, this was a Samaritan woman, and Jesus revealed so much to her. And he was revealing to us how we shouldn't, number one, look down on people, and number two, think because we are knowledgeable or maybe have a theology degree or maybe have done a lot in terms of Bible study, think we get it all. Are we really being open? Are we really looking beyond the obvious? You don't need to be hit over the head with the Bible or a catechism to know that you have to help the poor, the immigrant, those in need and physical need. Again, the unborn, the elderly. But you do have to be dedicated enough to the Lord and to constantly pray, Lord, what do I need to do here? Am I missing something or someone that's really in need right under my nose? Just like the Levite, right? And the priest, literally seeing this man half dead on the road and they walk by, not paying any attention. How many times do we do that? And so Jesus is not going to, as Father Bob said yesterday in his beautiful homily, he's not going to put it all in a nice little box for us, because it is a journey. It's a journey of the heart. And as Pope Leo said in his beautiful reflection on this yesterday, both the audience and in his homily, how do we look upon others? Because that's what's revealing what's in our hearts. We don't want to be like the Levite and the priest, looking down on the Samaritan. We want to be, or the poor man, we want to be like the Samaritan who saw with his heart. So we need to think about that. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Great to be with you on Catholic Connection and EWTN production. And always great to catch up with my friend Deacon Dominic Cerrato, who's a PhD, a wonderful longtime deacon, an author, a speaker, and of course also editor of the beautiful The Deacon magazine, for which I write a Deacon's Wife column. He has a new book out, As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of the Church. But first, Deacon Dominic, I do want to discuss, and this was really disappointing to me because you and I know, and Judy and I know as deacons' wives, and Dominic knows how beautiful the diaconate ministry is. But an annual report from the Center for Applied Research in the Apostolate, and by the way, Catholic News Agency has an article on this that was posted last month, the middle of June, the number of ordinations of permanent deacons in the U.S. has decreased by nearly 200 from 2023 to 2024, according to a recent survey. That's very disappointing to me. I'm sure it's disappointing to you as well. Thanks for joining us, Deacon. Appreciate it.
That's great to be here with you.
So what do you think?
Well, I think that you have to look at things not in isolation, but in the broader context. And it can be argued that the diaconate is the largest growing segment in the church. So to see a small dip, especially in light of certain factors which we can discuss, factors which I think are genuinely temporary, is simply a little downturn in an otherwise upward rise.
Okay, so what are we looking at? What do you think is impacting this slight dip, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, post-COVID vocational lag. There's a disruption in nearly every aspect of diocesan life as a result of COVID, including diaconal formation programs, ordination schedules, discernment retreats, and even in-person parish ministries. And these are key touch points for identifying and nurturing vocations to the diaconate. Some dioceses, including the one I work for, the Diocese of Joliet, actually delays our intake of a new class, which would account for part of this lag. There's certainly an aging diaconal corpus, I should say, not corpse. So many are going out where we have fewer coming in, but young people are unfortunately being discouraged for coming in the diaconate. I think this is most unfortunate because if God calls and it's a genuine call, he's going to provide the grace. Other factors, including cultural shifts, formation, and limited resources, all of these add up to a slight downturn in an otherwise rising trend within the diaconate.
You mentioned something, you said that young people are being discouraged from applying for the diaconate. Why is that?
Well, I think the diaconate hasn't fully entered into the Catholic imagination, and people tend to see it as this sort of the grandpa club or a retirement vocation. Consequently, when people have young families, some deacons and some priests have actively discouraged young people from entering the diaconate, saying, wait till your family is settled. Now, that may well be the case in some cases, but the point here, Teresa, is formation is discernment. They're discerning, this is to say the men in formation and their families are discerning the diaconate, but also the diocese is discerning them. And it may well be the case that they're not called early, but it may be the case. And I think the wholesale say that you should wait is most unfortunate, and it fails to take into consideration the grace of God, which can be received if the call is genuine.
That's a great point, because it seems as if, and of course, Deacon Dominic and I weren't blessed with any children of our own, but we knew many couples who were discouraged in our area from going into the diaconate because they had very young children. And it seems almost like an accepted, or everybody thinks that's the rule.
Right. And I was ordained at the youngest canonical age at 35. We had 5 children at that time. We have blessed with 7 children at this point. But and so I had young children, even in infants, even after I was ordained. Again, my call, I believe, was genuine. Certainly the diocese thought that way. And most important, my wife thought that as well. And so God gave us the grace to be able to do this. And I think that has to be discerned on a case-by-case basis. So a wholesale elimination of young people, I think, is most unfortunate, and it fails, again, to take into account God's grace.
Isn't it a concern, though, even with a slight dip, because given the number of priests, or lack thereof, we need deacons. I mean, deacons are needed, and I think they're going to be relied upon even further in the future of the church, in the near future, don't you?
I do, and I think there's 2 elements to that. The first of which, as you bring up, is the pragmatic element. Our priests are getting fewer and they're getting older, and therefore deacons can, within the scope of their ministries, do some of the things that priests can do, and therefore relieve some of that pastoral shortfall. That's certainly, in fact, as a director, I would get calls regularly from priests who say, I need a deacon, and I'm like, let me check my closet. Let me see if I have any. You got to send them to me, and there's a pipeline, right, of the deacons. But there's something else going on here, and we've got to ask ourselves, I think, a very important question, and that is, when the diaconate was restored, there was no priestly vocational crisis. The seminaries were full. Parishes were full. So why was it restored? Was it restored for pragmatic reasons? I think not. Why? Well, the diaconate is the preeminent witness of Christ the servant to the world. I mean, that's what the diaconate really is. Everything he does flows from that witness to Christ the servant, which should be active in every baptized person. So I believe that it's a movement of the Holy Spirit to renew and rediscover Christ the servant across every vocation, both lay and clerical vocations.
What can we do to really promote the diaconate? Because it's such a beautiful ministry, and it's not just a ministry, as you said, unless you're a single man who's going into the diaconate. But if you're usually it's a married man, and most of the married deacons, most of the deacons in the United States at least, are married. What can we do to promote the diaconate?
Well, certainly from the inside out, deacons themselves can promote the diaconate simply by the exercise of revealing Christ the servant in their various ministries. But the other thing is that, and this is from Deacon James Keating, he speaks about it not entering into the Catholic imagination. The catechesis is not there. Even in seminary, the transitional deacons are given very little, if any, formation on the diaconate. They receive formation in terms of the liturgical aspects of it, but not really in the sort of the ontological, the deeper reality, because the church argues that a man must first be, on the deepest level of his being, a deacon before he becomes a priest. So seminary formation, that means it enters into the imagination of the priesthood, it enters into the imagination of the episcopacy. Catechesis, it moves to the laity, and those things together. Also, it would help if Catholic publications, particularly periodicals and so forth, popular publications, could write more on the diaconate. And you find very little written on the diaconate. We see this lack of imagination when you hear the universal prayer at Mass. Let's pray for our Pope, our bishops, our priests, our religious, our lay, on and on and on. And the deacon is almost always left out of that equation.
Well, our church includes it. My pastor is very pro diaconate, and he's always reminding people about this beautiful ministry of the diaconate. Having a great conversation with our friend Deacon Dominic Cerrato, author, PhD, speaker, and deacon, of course, editor of the Deacon magazine. When we come back, we'll wrap up our discussion on the way we can help promote the diaconate, given the numbers are slightly down, and we need to keep them moving up. We're going to take a look also at his new book, As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of Christ. It's published by our friends at Our Sunday Visitor. Deacon Dominic, how long have you been a deacon now? How many years?
30 years.
Wow, 30 years. Yeah, Deacon Dom my Deacon Dom will celebrate 13 years in October, and it's gone by so fast. It's a beautiful ministry. We'll be right back. More on the diaconate. Stay tuned. You're listening to Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio Extra. Always love catching up with my paisan and my good friend Deacon Dominic, another Deacon Dominic Cerrato, talking about the slight dip in diaconate numbers over the last couple of years, but we always want to be positive and look at the glass as half full versus half empty. But before we move on to your beautiful book, any final thoughts, Deacon Dom, on how we can make a difference in the diaconate to get more people encouraged? Because, it's such a beautiful ministry, not just for the men, but for the wives as well. I love being a deacon's wife.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're doing things, for example, right now on your show, so people are getting to understand, and of course the next segment will get into that a little bit more. So I think things like publications, things like the radio and television, EWTN, those kinds of things are awful helpful, or tremendously helpful, I should say, in promoting the diaconate. But the point I made earlier is very important, and part of what my ministry is about is helping deacons become more fully who they are. And I think that we can talk about the diaconate, but when they see the diaconate, people see the diaconate, actually Christ the servant incarnate in the very work. That I think is the most important way to help the diaconate enter into the Catholic imagination.
And I think to encourage people, if they're curious, to make sure they call their diocese or their archdiocese. So, for example, in southeastern Michigan, the Archdiocese of Detroit, we have a meeting where they just bring men who are just thinking about it, and they invite their wives just to kind of hear the process. What does it mean to apply for the diaconate, the discernment process, the program, the classes, the formation, just to give you a sense of what's involved. So if someone is out there listening, and there usually is, that maybe somebody has it on their heart that they might want to discern the diaconate, I would go ahead and make sure you call your diocese and get into one of those meetings, right?
That's right. That's right. You can also go online to take a look at what they've got going on there. It would be the diaconal page. Contact the director of the diaconate.
Right.
But I was seeing a rise simply anecdotally, because we currently have about 20 men that will be ordained in August. We have 2 cohorts currently going on, and we haven't even begun advertising, and we have for that next cohort 13 men who've made application. So we're seeing a bump after the slight downturn. I don't know if this is anecdotal or statistical.
And what diocese is that again, Deacon?
That's the Diocese of Joliet, just south of Chicago.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay. Let's move on to your beautiful book, As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of Christ. Why did you decide to write this, Deacon Dominic?
Well, I think one of the things that I've seen, and it's a result of, I think, secular forces pushing in on the church, is that we tend to become much more functional than relational. Right? We're not human doings, we're human beings. And the relationship between priests, deacons, and even clergy in general, as in our society, tends to be functional. Think of it as 2 gears coming together, 2 cogs in a machine. When we come together, let's say at liturgy, well, we're connected. But then when we leave, we sort of live separate lives and far away. And just as in marriage, the importance of marriage and the unity of marriage to the well-being of the children, so too with the priests and the deacons coming together. And so there needs to be more work in that area. And the other thing is that it strikes me very clear that Christ wants this unity because it's a unity grounded in Him, Teresa. What do I mean by that? Jesus says in both Mark and Matthew's Gospel, I have come not to be served, but to serve. That's diakonia. That's diakonos. He is the diakonos. He is the deacon, the par excellence. And then he says, and give my life as ransom for the many. That's sacerdos. That's priesthood. The diaconate and the priesthood come together in the one Christ, such as to split them up or to not have unity is to somehow to split up the Christus totus, the whole Christ. And so the book attempts to find both theological and practical means to bring priests and deacons together so that they themselves could be mutually nourished and the faithful benefit from that.
How are you seeing a disconnect then? I mean, obviously you wrote the book because you see this is obviously necessary to strong former bonds and working together in relationships. But what are some of the issues that you've seen?
Well, I mentioned functionality. Now, the deacon is called to be a servant. And if he only functions with the priest, only connects at certain times, he doesn't get to know the priest. Well, you can't really serve someone you don't really know. The more you know, like in marriage, you know Dominic, so you know what he would want in his absence. And when priests and deacons don't have that, they don't understand each other in their absence. And I think that is a critical thing. And so I see it there, and I see it in other aspects of church life, pastorally, liturgically, and a number of other different areas where we simply disconnect. And this is really symptomatic of a deeper disconnect in that priests used to live in community. They used to relate to one another. Now they live in separate areas, in separate rectories. And so the relationship of priest to priest also needs to be strengthened, as well as priest and deacon.
So what are some of your ideas? Share with us. Now, I don't want to give it all away because we want people to buy the book, As I Have Loved You. But how do we overcome this?
Well, it's interesting because in the book, which is only 5 chapters, it's not a big book. But in the book, in each chapter, I lay the theological foundation, and I lay then the pastoral application, or how priests and deacons come together. And in the heart of the book, I talk about priests rediscovering their own diaconate because they were ordained deacons. But that notion of a transitional deacon is, while descriptive, very misleading because it hides more than it reveals. because they don't transition out of the diaconate. Quite the opposite. They have this diaconate, which is, of course, ontological, and of course, it's like an indelible mark. It stays with them. And then they're ordained priests. Well, the priesthood doesn't swallow up the diaconate. Rather, they both cohabitate or coexist in the one priest. In order for a priest to truly appreciate the diaconate, he has to fully appreciate and appropriate his own diaconate. And when he does so, the relationship between priests and deacons are strengthened, as with the bishop. Now, the next chapter, most interestingly, it speaks about the priesthood of the diaconate.
Diaconate,
what?
right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what is that all about? You say, well, the Catechism says that there are two participations in the one priesthood of Christ. There's the hierarchical or ministerial priesthood, Father so-and-so, and of course, the lay people, and that would be the common or royal priesthood. But I suspect there's a third participation because deacons are neither priests nor their laity, and that is the sort of the diaconate priesthood. What is that? Well, a priest is one who offers sacrifice in the atonement of sins. When the deacon gives himself in service, he is sacrificing himself because the quality of love is expressed in the depths of the sacrifice. And diaconia is not something I do, but someone I give my very self. So as priests discover the diaconate within them, and as deacons discover a priesthood within them, that lays a foundation, a theological foundation grounded in Christ, who is a deacon and priest. And as a result, then we can move to practical ways. And the book then goes into how priests and deacons can meet, the reflection questions they might have, and how they can continue on past the book.
Why did you feel the need, which I think is great, I love that, I do that in a lot of my books as well, because it gets people to stop and think, but why the reflection questions? Why did you think that was necessary, Deacon?
Well, first of all, it provides an opportunity for both priests and deacons to come together, because if we just come together, guys are funny that way. We don't just get together for coffee and just chat about things. No, there's got to be a football game on or a common hobby or something. It's just the nature of the way we're wired.
Right.
And if we don't have something to speak about, we just stare at each other and then we go our separate ways. So it was important for us, I think, to have something. The other thing is to use an unfortunate analogy. It's not force feed and regurgitation. It's eating, it's consuming and digesting. Reflection questions allow you to take the objective stuff you're talking about and say, well, how does that apply to me? And how can that help me live my vocation out in a more profound way?
I don't think those ideas, and I think they're very powerful, and going through the book, it really caught my attention as a deacon's wife, the diaconate in the priesthood and the priesthood in the diaconate. I don't think I've ever heard that before until I picked up your book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was a shock to me, too. They say even a blind pig can stumble on an acorn. And sometimes I stumble on a few acorns. But it arises out of, goes back to my own formation, particularly theological formation, and the influence of Pope John Paul II and his personalism. So having in my path books developed the theology of the diaconate and then developed a theology of holy orders because, and I describe in the book, a triptych, right? You got the bishop in the middle, and then the two flaps, the two sides are the priest and deacon. Well, if one is partially closed, the diaconate, it obscures the other parts. Moreover, the whole story can't be told unless both sides of the triptych are open. Developing the theology of the diaconate, the next natural consequence was and holy orders, how do these come together? And so this book really is part of a series of 3 books in which we deal with the servant reality now in the clergy.
Is this something you'd like to see in diaconate formation and priestly formation programs? I think it would be very helpful.
Oh, yes, absolutely, because I think that until we understand the full nature of holy orders, we're not going to understand the full nature of Christ, who is diakonos and sacerdos, who is deacon and priest. And Christ is the perfect revelation of God the Father. And so when that's obscured, well, something of that revelation is obscured. But when that's revealed, God's revelation, which is ultimately a divine love outpoured, when that's revealed, then the whole world benefits from it. Not just the church, but the whole world benefits from it.
How much emphasis in your research and work over the years, Deacon Dom, have you seen the seminaries and the formation programs for priests talk about and help them with their diaconate to make it a really big part of their process to priestly ordination? Because I can remember so many priests, even some who are now bishops, when they were serving their their diaconate portion of their ministry at our parish. They go on to be great priests. Now they're bishops or whatnot. But I don't remember hearing too much about that step, except to recognize that they were in that transitional period on their way to priesthood.
In seminaries, unfortunately, there's very little formation with regard to the diaconate. And Deacon Keating, myself, and about 3 others wrote a piece in the a journal describing the lack of priestly diaconal formation in priestly formation. I spoke one time to a vice rector of a major seminary, and I asked him about that. He got a little defensive, and he said, "Well, we're ordaining priests." And I said, "But you're also ordaining deacons, right? I mean, how could you be open to a sacrament you're not prepared for?" So,
right.
And I talked to a priest, and he said to me, "Well, we had sacraments." And I said, well, "Okay, so you had sacraments, and there are 3 categories of sacraments, one of which is the sacraments of service, and then you've got 2 of those, one holy orders, one marriage, and then holy orders, you got divided into 3. So that's not sufficient. So there isn't a lot of formation and that's unfortunate, because again, I think when the priest discovers his diacon, this is critical, he discovers something about his priesthood. So look, a priest is a priest in a coma when he's asleep, right? But his priesthood enters the world through his diaconate. Think about this. We call it priestly ministry, ministerium, diaconia. And so if they don't fully embrace their diaconate, they're going to attenuate their priesthood.
Wow. Really important stuff. And I hope this book gets into the hands of, even if men are listening right now and are thinking about applying for the diaconate, get a copy of this book. And I really hope dioceses pick up on this as well. As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of Christ, by our guest, my friend, Deacon Dominic Cerrato. How do we get the book?
Well, you can get it through Amazon or Sunday Visitor would be the best place to get it. And even lay people, if they want to get that for their priests and deacons, that would be a great thing too.
Well, my deacon husband, as I told you, when the book came in the mail, he even grabbed it from me. I had to grab it back in order to do the prep for this show. Deacon Dom, always great to talk to you, my friend. Give Judy my love, and we will talk soon. Again, get this beautiful book, friends. It's just really well done and very quick to read, too. As I Have Loved You, Clerical Unity in the Heart of Christ. We'll be right back. Thanks so much for tuning in to the second hour of A Catholic Connection on a Wednesday. We appreciate you here at EWTN's Radio Extra and all of our radio channels, TV channels, our great outlets, our news outlets. Speaking of outlets, I'd love for you to check out the Deacon magazine, thedeacon.com. And, of course, we know that Deacon Dominic Cerrato, who's a good friend of ours here at EWTN, is the editor of that fine magazine. And you can check out my column for wives. I write a column 2 or 3 times a year for the magazine, and I love doing it because I think it's important to get the wives' perspective. Deacon Dom will be marking, God willing, 13 years, as I mentioned, as a deacon in October, and it's such a beautiful ministry. And the Deacon magazine really introduces you to a lot about what's going on in the life of deacon couples and different efforts to recruit more to the diaconate. But it's just a beautifully written and published magazine. And, of course, Deacon Harold Berg-Sivers, our very own, also has an article in that magazine on a regular basis. Excited about tomorrow's show? Well, I'm excited about every show, but tomorrow, you don't want to miss it. We are going to be sitting down with, in addition to the amazing Father Mitch Pacwa for our Cultural Connections, first up in the 9 a.m. Eastern Hour, we're also going to be sitting down with the producer of a brand new, beautiful animated Christian film. And I can't wait to take my grandnieces to see this. It's called Light of the World. And the producer, Brennan McPherson, is going to be joining us. I love these types of films because I think they are tools not only for our children, our grandchildren, our grandnieces in my case, but also for all of us. We get a little bit and maybe a lot re-educated in the faith. Have a great Wednesday. God willing, talk to you tomorrow on a Thursday. A domani.